Welcome to this edition of Sadler Sessions. A rising star of the training ranks, Katherine Coleman, is our special guest. She tells us about her upbringing in Western Australia, coming across the Nullarbor and learning from trainers like Chris Waller before then going out and joining Peter Moody in partnership. We also chatted about their big wins together and her role in that team that includes star jockey Luke Nolan. Enjoy this chat. Here she is, Katherine Coleman. Katherine, you're surrounded by saddlers wherever you go, whether it's at work, the races, etc. But thank you for coming in to chat with another saddler here on Sadler Sessions.
No, my pleasure to be here. You've had very high quality of guests on so far, so I'm a little bit nervous to be here, but very privileged that you asked me to come on.
No pressure. Great to have you here. Let's go back to the beginning of your story then. Growing up in Western Australia, you're not from a racing family as such. What are your first memories of horses or racing?
I got the horse bug probably when I was about 10 years old, and I just remember asking Mum if I could take riding lessons. And at that point in time, they'd sort of tried to put me in every sport imaginable, and I'd been absolutely woeful at all of them and hadn't lasted very long. I was very uncoordinated, terrible hand-eye coordination. So we'd already probably tried netball, basketball, gymnastics, taekwondo, swimming, all of the above. Nothing had lasted very long. So I'm sure when I said to Mum, can I try horse riding? She probably thought, perfect, this isn't going to last long either. But it was the one thing that stuck. I just loved it and sort of ended up getting able to lease a friend's old pony club horse and started doing pony club. Eventually got into sort of equestrian competitions, eventing and that sort of thing. And sort of learnt that way, really.
Were you a natural with horses straight away?
It always felt very natural to me. And I think just the fact that it was something that I loved, and it's never felt like work. It's never felt like it's a hard thing to get out of bed and go and do, even when you've got a teenage girl, and I'm sure there's, a rare breed of us that would be wanting to get up and go and muck out horse poo from paddocks and go and work at the stables on afternoons and school holidays just for that little bit of extra horse time. But, when you've got that passion, that's all you want to do. You're horse mad.
So when does it go from being horse mad as a hobby to I could do this professionally?
So I started working at a pacing stable, actually. That was my first ever job in racing for Kim Prentice in Bunbury, just sort of, after school, on school holidays and weekends for a little bit of extra pocket money, and always loved it. I loved the atmosphere of the stables. I loved the characters that you met through racing. I loved the excitement of going to the races and having a winner and things like that. But I never really thought of it as a career. It was always just, once I finished year 12, I'd go off to university and get a real job. When I finished year 12, I was accepted in to do physiotherapy at uni, and I took a gap year before that and worked full-time with the horses in the pacing stable. Had the best year of my life, just absolutely adored it. But again, never really saw it as a career. It was always just sort of, we'll do this for a year and then go off and get serious. I lasted probably not even 6 months at uni doing physio. I just didn't feel right for me, and I guess I was drawn back to the horses. And I thought I'd love to work with thoroughbreds and give that a go. And to Mum and Dad's credit, when I said to them, I don't want to go back to uni to the second semester, I want to go back to working with the horses, they fully supported me. And so it was probably from that time then, I guess I was about 19 years old, when I sort of started thinking about, okay, maybe this is actually what I want to do with my life.
The first time I can recall meeting you was at the Aquanita offices when my dad was training there. Robert Smurden was there back at Caulfield about 10 years ago. Join the dots. How do you go from WA to working in one of the major stables in Melbourne?
Yeah, so I started off my journey with the thoroughbreds working for Graham Yule down in Dardanup. He was a small trainer. They broke in and pre-trained and had a couple of racehorses. And one of the stables that they pre-trained for was Simon Miller in Perth, who at the time was the Perth Aquanita trainer. And I'd worked for Graham for probably about 12, 18 months when I sort of got this idea in the back of my head that, gee, I'd love to go to Melbourne or Sydney and work in a big stable. And especially in WA, you see the spring carnivals, the autumn carnivals, the group ones, and you know that the best horses, the best jockeys, the best trainers, they're all over here. And yeah, I sort of got this idea in my head that if one day maybe I wanted to be one of the best, then I needed to go and work for the best. And so Simon sort of put that in motion and he said, okay, well, I can get you in with Robert Smurden over at Caulfield. And so he sort of pulled some strings there. And next thing you know, I'd packed up the Toyota Ute that I had at the time, and Mum and I were road tripping across the Nullarbor. And I sort of committed to giving it a go for 3 months. I said, right, give this a go for 3 months and then see where we're at. And I'm very, very close to my family and friends back home. And for those first couple of months, gee, I was homesick and it was a pretty tough slog at times. But by the time those 3 months were up, I'd sort of made some really good friends and probably, planted some roots here and was really starting to enjoy it. And it's sort of just gone from strength to strength, really.
Set the scene for us. Go to work at Caulfield at Aquanita. It's a vibrant training hub. There's a lot of characters there. There's a lot of star horses as well. You're up doing long hours. What was it like walking into that Caulfield trainer's hat for the first time and being surrounded not only by Robert, for instance, but Peter Moody, who we'll elaborate on, Mick Price, Clinton McDonald, a lot of big personalities all in one fairly small area?
Yeah, definitely. I think I was absolutely blessed to be there at that time, surrounded by those trainers and those personalities. And, to this day, each one of those trainers have been absolutely amazing to me. And I know that I could sort of turn to any of them now if I wanted advice, and they'd answer the phone on the first ring and be the first one to offer a bit of help or advice. But yeah, I can certainly remember going there and thinking that, I was pretty crash hot and I can ride track work and, here we go, come to Melbourne and I'm ready to rock and roll. And I just got bolted on by nearly every single horse that I rode the first week. And I think Robert was tearing his hair out in that trainer's hut going, oh God, where have we found this girl? And I got relegated to the stable pony for a little while. Before gradually just worked my sort of way back up again. And thankfully, Robert was very patient with me and got me going. And yeah, it was a very educational time. But yeah, definitely a time that I'll cherish, that's for sure.
You said before that if you wanted to be the best, you wanted to work for the best. When you say that, are you saying you wanted to be a trainer? Had you had that in your sights even that far back ago?
Yeah, I think so. I'm quite tall, so I don't think being a jockey was ever in the cards for me, as well as like the fact that I mentioned terrible hand-eye coordination. There would have been whips flying everywhere if I tried to do that. But I loved the horsemanship side of training as well. For me, that's always been a big part of it. All the things that go on behind the scenes that lead into it, not just the race day experience. So yeah, I think from pretty early on, I'd always had the idea that if I could, I wanted to go down the training path.
So the next step after Robert, you go to Chris Waller at Flemington. How did that all eventuate, Katherine?
Yeah, another thing of probably being in the right place at the right time. Robert had stopped training and I was sort of looking to see what the next step was going to be. And Chris was going through an absolute boom period at that time. He had horses like Winx, the Autumn Sun, Invincibella, just countless brilliant horses racing at that time. And it sort of worked out that he was looking for a foreman at the Flemington stable. And so for me, it was a pretty logical next step to go and do that and work for another great trainer and see a completely different way of doing things.
What makes Chris Waller so successful from your time working for him?
I'd say just the attention to detail, how pedantic he is about the little one percenters. And it's funny because sometimes you look at it and you think those little things can't make that much of a difference. But on the overall scale of things, when things are coming down to the very, very minute details, he's all over every single one of them.
Walking into a stable like that where you've got those horses of that quality, particularly Winks, when you're working with them every day, are they just another horse, or does Weeks still have that rock star aura about her that got people to come to the races to see a champion like her?
Yeah, definitely. Especially by the time I started working at Waller's, she was already up at that elite level. I think she'd won 3 Cox plates already. I was lucky enough to be there when she won her 4th. But yeah, she certainly had already stamped herself as a superstar. So she definitely was treated accordingly. And, knowing that you had those sorts of horses in the stable was a real buzz for everyone, for all of the staff. But definitely, the stress and anxiety levels always went up considerably when she was in the stable.
And given you work for Robert, working for Chris, you've got your sights set on becoming a trainer yourself. Were you like a sponge in these stables as well, too, trying to soak up as much as you could to use for your own benefit at some point in time?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was the way that I approached it, was that, okay, well, I've decided not to go to university so that I can try and use this as a career path with the horses. So I need to look at these years as my education. Basically, my university degree in becoming a horse trainer was trying to work for these amazing trainers themselves and learn as much as I could. And, I would go home and write notes and fill out notebooks of different work that horses had done, or the vet work that we were doing at the time, and just things to try and sort of cement that knowledge in your brain.
Do you still have those notebooks?
I do still have the vet work ones, yeah, and still like to refer back to them. Especially at Roberts, we had an amazing vet, Dr. Kim McKellar, who'd come in once a week from Ballarat, and I spent a lot of time with Kim there every Saturday morning doing trot ups, and he was just brilliant. His knowledge, his eye for the horses, and his ability to be able to detect a lameness and things like that. I'm incredibly grateful for the knowledge that he passed on to me.
Because being a horse trainer is such a unique career. You've got to be a business person. You're running a business at the same time as you're trying to train horses, manage owners, be a horse person, be someone that can have staff working for you. There's a lot of moving parts to being a trainer, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. There is. And I think that's where these days we're so lucky, and especially myself, I'm so fortunate that training partnerships have become more and more prominent, because I certainly wouldn't be in the position that I am today if it weren't for the fact that Peter Moody had wanted to go into a partnership. So I think they definitely help young aspiring trainers. There's a lot of us in the same boat that wouldn't be in the position that we are today if it weren't for that.
So let's talk about that. Was that straight after Waller's that you went to work for Peter Moody?
Yeah, at Waller's, I'd been there about 2 years, and I was sort of starting to question how realistic this idea that I had was of wanting to be a horse trainer. Along the road, there'd been plenty of people that sort of said it's not realistic for someone that has no family backing in the industry. You're starting from scratch. Where are you going to find horses? Where are you going to get owners from? Who's going to believe in, this 26-year-old girl from Western Australia that, doesn't have anyone behind her, basically. And so I was sort of probably doubting my ability to be able to do that on my own, and questioning whether there was a future for me in the industry when Pete announced that he was going to come back training. And I remember joking around to a few of the guys at Waller's and saying, "That's me. See you guys. I'm gonna be out of here." And I happened to bump into Pete at the races not long after that, and he just said, "You and I should probably have a chat, Dal." And I said, "I don't think we need to. Just sign me up. It's a yes." And after that, yeah, we went for lunch. We had a good chat about what he was wanting to do with coming back training. What he was looking for basically was an assistant trainer to come on and work with him, see how we got along, with the view that if we did, go okay together, then maybe one day it would be a training partnership. Because he'd sort of found a little bit more of work-life balance in his time away from racing, and he wanted to be able to keep that if he could. And yeah, thankfully, it's all working out pretty well.
Had you had much to do with Moody at Caulfield? Had you had enough of a relationship to lead into that conversation?
I'd sort of mainly just seen him, as I was riding track work or as I was riding past the tower, and he was always the first one to say, "Morning, Dal," and he's got that incredible charisma and personality. He's larger than life in a lot of ways, and everyone sort of knew who he was. I didn't necessarily thought that he knew who I was. I wouldn't have expected him to, but I think he'd sort of put the feelers out a little bit and asked around and said, to a couple of the other Caulfield trainers, does anyone know who might be a good person for this sort of a role? And thankfully, a couple of them threw my name in the ring, and it worked out.
I'll ask you the job interview style of question. You've already got the job, so you don't need to worry. There's no pressure here. But what do you think it is about you and your journey that made you the best fit for that role that Peter was looking for?
I think it probably he knew that I had a good work ethic. That coming without sort of the family backing, that you've got to be willing to work hard because it's only you're the only one that can make it happen, really. So I think he knew, and he's someone as well that's got an amazing work ethic. He's a very, very hard worker. So I think he was looking for someone that shared those same values.
The training partnership side of things, it's a pretty new thing in the world of racing, the grand scheme of things. When you look at the young trainers now, people like yourself, Michael Kent Jr., have all gone down the training partnership side of things, then say my brother Tom, Reese Goodwin, Clayton Douglas have gone out on their own. For you, was the partnership the best option to go down to get your training career started overall?
Yeah, definitely. I've no doubt that I wouldn't be in the position that I am if it weren't for the partnership. And I'll always be forever grateful to Pete and Sarah Moody for providing me with this opportunity. I've got so much respect for trainers that have gone out on their own. Your brother Tom, Clayton, Reese Goodwin, what they're able to do. I have so much respect and admiration for that because I know how hard it is for them to be going out and doing that without, the backing of a senior trainer there behind them. And, Moods is basically my mentor, my coach in a lot of ways. He's the senior partner in the role of things, but it's something that we can bounce ideas off each other all the time. And obviously as time goes on, I'm getting more confident in backing my own judgment and making my own decisions. But it would still be a big call to be doing that without him. For the guys that have gone out and started from scratch and are able to do that and sort of learn on their own, I've got a lot of admiration for that.
So as you say, he's your mentor, Moods. He can be quite an intimidating kind of character. What's he like to be working with?
Yeah, look, he's incredible. He obviously, he can be a little bit of a bear at times, but at the end of the day, he's got this amazing charisma about him that makes you want to go to war for the man. You just want to make him proud of you. He's got such a strong work ethic himself, and he's so passionate about what we're doing that it's impossible not to be swept up in that yourself. And I hope one day I can inspire my staff the way that he inspires me and the people that we've got working for us now, because like I said, he gives a little bit of a rev up or a pep talk and you're ready to go to war for him.
There any rev ups on the negative side of things? Have you ever needed that kick up the backside to say, come on, Katherine, what are you doing here?
To be honest with you, it's probably been pretty smooth sailing in that regard. I remember very, very early on when we just started back up at Pakenham, we were probably a little bit understaffed, and he'd asked me to put some job ads out and get some more staff in. But obviously people don't grow on trees, especially experienced racing people, and I probably hadn't been proactive enough in finding us some more staff. And I remember he gave me a bit of a rev up about it, and then I just didn't stop working for the next 12 hours. I think I was just absolutely going hard trying to make up for it and get back in his good books. And so he went, oh, geez, I'm not going to do that again. This girl's going to burn herself out otherwise. And so I think since then, we've worked together for 5 or 6 years now, day in, day out. We know each other very well. We can read each other very well at this point as well. And I think, it's probably been a little while since there's been a serious rev up required.
What was the beginning of all of that like for you and Moods working together? Because first time you've worked together, he's first time back training for a few years and all in a new stable. So there was a lot to really get started with.
Yeah, definitely. We look back at the early days now and we have a little bit of a laugh at times. We came back and we had a small group of staff there, and we were going to start off just with small numbers and gradually build up again. But Moods being Moods sort of got a bit twitchy after the first week and decided that we needed more horses, and so went out and found horses from here, there and everywhere. And obviously then we didn't have the staff numbers really to be dealing with that many horses at that time. And so it was a little bit of chasing our tail there at the start as we found our routine and found our feet. But it was probably a little bit of character building things happening at times. But overall, it was a good experience, and it's something that I'm very proud of to have been a part of from the start.
2023 is when you go into partnership officially with Moods. When you had that first lunch together, was there a time frame put in when a training partnership could happen, or was it more of a case of it just felt natural and like you were ready to go in that area?
There was never a time frame put on it, and it was never a certainty either. It was all very much, we'll just see how we go and, see how things progress. And I remember we were at Flemington races and we had a bit of a gap between races, so we went and had another lunch actually. And
Moods would be good for a lunch, I'd imagine.
He knows all the good spots, all the good local spots, definitely. He'll take you for Yum Cha in Caulfield, and it'll be the best one you've ever been to, I guarantee it. We sort of had a bit of a chat, a bit of a catch up about how things were going, and it was then that he sort of said, well, start getting everything happening because, I think next season we apply for the partnership to go through. And I sort of remember being, pretty speechless at the time because, for me that was a big moment, sort of a lot of dreams come true, really.
How different is it going from being his assistant trainer to co-trainer outside of the obvious being your name's there in the book and the form guide?
As far as the general running of the day-to-day stable, nothing really changed. At the end of the day, like I said, he's still the senior trainer between us, and I still know that my main role is basically assisting him and making his life as easy as possible. So, like I said, nothing in that regard really changed too much, especially at the beginning. That was never sort of the idea behind it. So I guess it was more so just recognition from outside forces as to how much of an impact my sort of role was playing.
So your first winner, you didn't have to wait long, Katherine. First day, wasn't it? Run, sir?
Yeah, it was. Our first runner was our first winner. Run, sir, at Pakenham. First day of the new season, I believe, as well. And, we hadn't orchestrated it. We hadn't, held this horse back from other races thinking this is how it's going to work out. It was just, I guess it was fate in some ways that the way that it panned out. And I don't think that he won another race for us after that either, but he's always a horse that will stick with me for a long, long time.
How much does that mean to be a winning trainer?
It was incredibly special, and we had, Sarah Moody was there on course that day, and Celine and the girls as well, and having, the family there, and at the end of the day, they've basically just adopted me into their family as a fourth daughter, and so to have them all there on course was really special.
And just on that point, because I look at you and Moods and Luke and the Moods' family, seems like quite a strong, loyal group. Is that the right perception I'm getting?
Yeah, most definitely. The relationship that Moods and Luke have, I think, is pretty unique and pretty special. And to be a part of that, I think is quite an honour. When I look back, I remember watching Black Caviar win at Royal Ascot from the lounge room in Bunbury, Western Australia. And now to think that I'm a part of sort of their relationship and their journey is, it still doesn't really seem real to me.
And I know you say that Moods is the senior partner, but in my role with racing.com, I think out of every 10 interviews I've done with Moody Coleman Racing, 8's been with you, which I enjoy, don't get me wrong, but say a couple with Moods. Are you more the public face of the business? Has Moods taken in this era of his training career a bit of a backseat in that respect?
Yeah, I think he's, he does enjoy bits and pieces of media, but he's also more than happy to avoid it as much as he possibly can. So for him, I think that was probably one of the draws of the partnership as well, was having someone that can take on, some of those roles that he isn't too crazy for these days, media, some of the owner communication and relations and things like that, the bits and pieces that he probably doesn't want to have to think about too much so that he can just really focus on the horses.
So who's got the job of telling the owners bad news?
Well, I'll give him credit. He still does like to do most of that himself. Every now and again, he's trying to toughen me up a little bit and make me take on more and more of those sorts of responsibilities. And I'd say as the years go by, they'll be hearing from me more and him less when it's bad news.
Let's talk about good news, though, some of the highlights. Chain of Lightning to win a first Group 1 in a really strong Group 1 race like the TJ Smith. What are your memories like of that day?
Yeah, that was so special. She was a mare that was one of my favourites. I used to sort of ride her track work a lot and had a really good bond with her. And, she'd won a couple in a row when she first came to us, and she had a bit of a boom around her. And then she sort of lost her way a little bit. And in hindsight, she just kept running into rock hard tracks and she just needed give in the ground. But every time we tried to run her without fail, that there'd be no rain around, track would end up upgrading to a good 3 and you probably just wouldn't see her at her best. And finally she went to Sydney and she found a soft track and she won. That was leading into the TJ. So she went there. We had I Wish I Win stablemate in the race as well, and he was the favoured runner of the two. And I remember I was at Caulfield that day. Moods had gone to Sydney, and I was in the Caulfield trainers room watching it. And, when Chain was leading and Wish was trying his heart out to get past her. And, yeah, it was just an amazing experience, to have two horses, two stablemates be able to do that in a Group 1 and have one of them win it was, unbelievable.
Who are you cheering for in that scenario?
By the end of it, I don't think I was specifically cheering for either of them, just as long as one of them got there.
You weren't there on course at Randwick that day. You were at Caulfield. Did that bother you at all that you weren't on track for your first Group 1 winner?
Look, I would have loved to be on course for it, but I think, again, it comes down to sort of knowing the knowing your role in things, and at the end of the day, just knowing how privileged I am to be in the position that I am, and to be watching it there with fellow trainers around you at Caulfield, and to know how thrilled they all were for me as well. That was certainly special in its own way.
And you mentioned I Wish I Win. To go into a position where you're working with a superstar like him, a superstar though who had his issues, was born with deformed legs basically. What a super horse he must have been to deal with.
Yeah, gee, he was something else, that horse. His will to win, and his desire to be a racehorse was second to none, really, when you think about how he started off in life and what he overcome to then be a multiple Group 1 winner is just amazing. And he was such a character around the stable as well. He was a real favourite with everyone because he was just so laid back and cruisy, until he realised, that he was either going on the grass track to have a gallop, or if he was at the races, when he sort of realised that, oh, hey, it's business time, he'd switch on. But any other time, he was just a laid back old pony that wandered around pretty relaxed. And we actually sort of used to say if he was a human, he would be like Luke Nolan. And if Luke Nolan was a horse, he would have been I Wish I Win, because they're both pretty laid back individuals. And yeah, look, to be a part of Wish's career was very, very special.
So for you to combine with them for what was the third Group 1 win of your career in Brisbane must have been a proud moment.
It really was. And it was the first one that I was on course for as well. And Wish had a few runs in Group 1s, and he'd run second and third. And, he was right there. He was knocking on the door. And so for him to do that, when I was there on course and Luke was back on board, it was sort of all the stars aligned. And it was quite funny, actually. I just remember, obviously, there was a bit of pressure on Luke that day because he hadn't he'd been out of form a little bit. He'd had a few injuries. He was sort of on the comeback trail. His weight hadn't been great. And so obviously he would have been feeling a little bit of pressure that day. And I just remember before the race, he came out and he had a bit of a swagger in his step, and he just said, before he got legged on the horse, he just said, "Hold my beer." And then off he went, and he gave it a 10 out of 10 ride, and they won. And he's only ever said that to me on two other occasions pre-race. He said to me, "Hold my beer." And that's when I know we're going to get a El Nolan special.
What have been the other two occasions out of interest?
Kirribilli winning at Pakenham not that long ago. She'd had an awkward draw. I think she'd drawn one and the fence was off, and we were sort of umming and ahhing, and she's a horse that we've sort of had a nice opinion of, and another one she'd been out of form a little bit, and there was a bit of pressure to sort of get her back performing, and everything else about the race shaped really nicely, but it was going to need a little bit of luck, and he was going to have to give it a good ride. And yeah, he sort of said, "Hold my beer," and went out there and gave her an absolute peach. And the other one was a bit more recent, and that was She's an Alibi at Caulfield just recently, and he also gave her a 10 out of 10 that day as well.
Absolutely. So that's coming to the end of this year's Spring Carnival. Winning the 1,000 guineas with Ole Dancer for your first Victorian Group 1 win. Tell us about that day.
That was a really special experience. The first Victorian Group 1, I consider Victoria to be home these days. So first Group 1 at home, and, she'd had a really good preparation. She'd had her two lead-up runs. She'd drawn wide and been running huge late, and we were really happy with how she came into the race. It was sort of just going to be a matter of if she was going to be good enough. But, she'd had, a faultless preparation leading into it, which, it's a pretty rare thing to have. Normally there'll be a few little niggles or setbacks along the way, but she'd been great through the whole prep. That had always been our target race, our grand final for her. And, when things fell into place and we pulled the plan off and we won our grand final, it was really satisfying, and it was great to be there and, to be there with Moods that day. And, it was another one that'll stick in the memory for a long time.
The vision of that's fantastic as well, because you're clearly engrossed in the moment watching the race. Moods looks like he's on smoko.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's actually some really good vision of him where he's even got the foresight to change his cigarette from one hand to another so that he didn't singe my dress, because he was that confident that I was going to be coming in for a hug after we won. So, I'd say he was pretty confident a long way out.
I'll ask you one more question about Moods, because this is your story. It's not the Peter Moody story. But say if you're at a dinner or at Christmas or a gathering and people ask you for your favourite Peter Moody story, what's the one that you roll out?
Gee, that's a tough one. I'm not sure I've really got one particular favourite story, really, because, I just every day with him there's always something that's, whether it's a funny comment here or there, it's just every day there's something new with him. And but I think my favourite thing about Pete, like I mentioned before, is just his charisma and how he can make people want to go to war.
Couple of years in then to the partnership, 230 winners. Surely that's something you're proud of. That's a great amount of success to have in a relatively short space of time.
Yeah, definitely. I'm incredibly proud of what our stable's been able to do, and that we're sort of consistently up there in the top 10 in the state with the numbers that we have. We're sort of we've never wanted to expand and get as big as Pete was in the Caulfield days. That's never been the idea. We want to keep it smaller numbers where we can really control the quality of horses that we have. We did go through a period probably about 12 months ago where we really lost form in the stable, and we had to do a bit of soul searching there and really sort of look at, go back to basics and look at if there was anything that we needed to change, or if it was just the stock that we had at the time, or, sort of what was going on, why we weren't getting the results that we wanted to be getting. And, the fact that we sort of had to go back to basics there, and to sort of quote Luke Nolan again, one of his favourite sayings is, you learn more about a team when they're going bad than when they're going good. And I think there's a lot of truth behind that as well. The whole my whole outlook on life is that it's about resilience, and it's about how you handle things when things are going bad. It's not just about celebrating the good times. And so, like I said, we had to do a fair bit of soul searching there and have a good look at everything and really go back to basics and back to square one. And, we didn't change a whole lot. We tweaked a few little things, but overall we sort of just trusted the process. And to then come out on the other side of that and be back, with Ole Dancer winning the 1,000 guineas and with some really exciting horses coming through looking towards the autumn, I think that overall is something that I really am proud of.
Numbers-wise, it's been a topic of contention for your stable. The line boutique stable has been used. It feels like you've got more than just a boutique number. How many do you work with roughly on the books? Yeah,
so we've got 50 give or take at our main stable in Pakenham at any one time. And then we've always got, plenty of pre-trainers there ready to take the spot of a horse when they do go out to the paddock or out for a break or anything like that. But I think just while we do joke about the boutique stable and things like that, I think the beauty of it is how hands-on it allows Moods and I to be with the horses. And it's little things that I probably took for granted at some stage a little bit. The fact that, every update of horses in training are done by either Pete or myself. And, a lot of the bigger stables, they're always done by either racing managers or assistant trainers or whatnot. But, for us, it's always, either he or I We know where all the horses are up to. We're seeing them every day. We've got our eyes on them all the time. And, that's sort of the way we want to keep it and the way that we just want to have quality rather than quantity.
Looking into the future then, being the younger person in a training partnership, eventually at some point, I know trainers struggle to retire, but eventually that has to happen for someone like Moods or whoever you are, the older person in that partnership. Is the plan then that it's Katherine Coleman racing, or what does it look like when the senior partner does eventually retire?
Yeah, look, hopefully it's not something that I have to worry about for a long time. I think I'll keep Moods going. I think he's got a few good years left in him yet. But Celine Moody, one of Pete and Sarah's daughters, has recently sort of taken a real interest in the stable as well. So I'm hopeful that eventually when one Moody retires, there might be another one there ready to take the place so that it can always still be Moody racing, and maybe it'll be Katherine Coleman and Celine Moody training partnership. Who knows? But yeah, look, it wouldn't be Moody racing without the larger than life Peter Moody there behind it. That's for sure. And it's a legacy that I hope that when he does retire, I can do it proud.
I'm sure you will. Couple to finish up with, racing is an all-consuming sport and it takes up so much of your time. But when you're not coming to do podcasts with pests in your free time, what do you like to do, Katherine? What's life away from work like for you?
Yeah, look, I do quite like putting on a podcast now and going for a walk, or, I quite enjoy getting to the gym and doing physical things like that just sort of allow you to switch your mind off for an hour or so, and, you're focusing other things, so you're not so much thinking about, racing or horses that you've got, or maybe something that's been, you're trying to figure out a problem with a particular horse or something. Sometimes just switching the brain off for an hour or so is the best thing for it, and you come back refreshed and you actually go, oh, it's a good idea. Maybe I'll try that.
And something that fascinates me that you said earlier in this chat was about when you're coming to the end of your time with Chris Waller, you wondered whether you were doing the right thing and your career was heading in the right direction. So for people who do want to become a trainer, they see what you've gone on to do now, but what advice would you have for that next generation that wants to get into the sport from now, what you've learned? What words of wisdom would you have, Katherine?
I think the best part about the racing industry is that it doesn't discriminate if you're male, female, young, old. If you've got that work ethic, you've got the will to learn and the desire to do it, anything is achievable. And I think my story probably goes to show that.
Katherine, it's been great to learn about your story, to chat about that, and I'll look forward to seeing your star continue to rise. Thanks for joining us here on Saddler Sessions.
Thanks for having me.